CSS selectors. What are they and how do they help us write our CSS instructions? Basically, a selector helps us target a specific element we want to style. There are three basic types of selectors. We have the element selector, the class selector, and the ID selector. The element selector basically assists us in targeting the element based on the name of the tag that the element contains. So the tag could be a paragraph tag, it could be an H1 tag, it could even be an image, a span, a div, or any other HTML element that can contain an item. The next one is the class selector. The class selector helps us target elements based on the specified class name, and the class selector helps us select more than one element. The last one is the ID selector, which helps us target an element based on a unique ID we set for that specific element. And now we are going to take a look at all these selectors practically. So let us open our Visual Studio and then look at how all these selectors work. So we have our Visual Studio opened and we've created an HTML file called selectors.html and then a CSS file also called selectors.css. Let's change the title into selectors, and then let us link this file to, so link with the reference CSS selectors. Okay, so that is fine. And then let us begin with a paragraph. Yeah, this is very okay. And then, so we have seen element selectors already. So paragraph, color red. I think we've been using color red too much. Let me switch on the server so that this opens. No, not here. We rather encode and then rather go to, okay, selectors.html. Yeah, so this is working. And then, so that is the element selector. Sorry, the VS Code was closed. Let me see, let me reopen that. Yeah, let me open the Visual Studio. So sorry about that. So let's turn on our server. It hasn't loaded yet. Okay, so live server has loaded now. Good. So this is an element selector. We can also have a div. So let's create a div. And then let's put in some words. This is my div element, and then we come to the CSS and then we write the name, which is div. So we write the name of the element itself. So that is a CSS element called div, and then we write our declaration here. So let's say border. We've not really done borders, but let us try that. So border 1 pixel solid, and then let's give it a color of blue, and let's see if it's going to work. Good, so we can see that it is working. So we have targeted this specific element, and you can see that if we add another div, let's do another div, and then call this one, this is a second div, and then open the site. Yeah, let me shift it here so that. So we can see that this styling is being applied to all the div elements, and that is what the element selector does. It selects all the elements that you have specified. There is a way that you can use to select certain elements without selecting the others, and that is the class. So let's give this div a class attribute of my div class. So get to note that we have assigned a class name to this second div. So let's come here, and then after specifying this, we now give it my div class, and then give it a border of, let's say, 2. I want something that is going to override it. So, okay, let's make this one dashed border, and then let's make this one color of green. I think I really like color green. So we can see that as soon as we changed it, nothing happened. This is because our CSS is seeing this as an element, but there is no CSS element called my div class. Okay, so if you want to call a class item, you begin with a period or a full stop. So you write the period here, and you see that as soon as we brought the period, the whole thing has changed. So right now, let's bring a line break so that we can see it well. Good, so this has been separated from that. I just separated this code from the other, and you can really see that this new div has a green text. What is happening here? This is due to what we call specificity. But before we get into specificity, let us still dwell on classes. So let's write another class, an h2 with the class, let's say topic, and then what is your favorite food? Let's see if good. So that's going to work. And then we give it some paragraph, and then let's say about 3 paragraphs. So p greater than, no, let's multiply it by 3 first, and then greater than lorem, each containing 20 words. So we have this. You can see that this is being applied already because we have selected the paragraphs to be read. You already know. And then let us now give this first class, this first paragraph, we are going to give it a class of paragraph 1, and then we come to the CSS. We know that if we want to describe a class, we begin with the period. So paragraph 1, and then we bring this, and then change the text align into center, Let's see if it's going to work. Good. So the text align is working. Let us now change the color into, let's say, light something. Let's go with light green is tired. So let's go with light sky blue. And that is working. You can see that this is not working for the rest because the rest have not been given the class of paragraph 1. So let's name it with something that is more catchy and explanatory. So let's say blue paragraph. So blue paragraph. So we are changing the class into blue paragraph, and so we come here and then change it into blue paragraph as well. And so it's applying here. If we want this same styling to be applied to the rest of the paragraphs, all that we do is to get into the head section or the first element or the opening tag, thank you, the opening tag of the element and then specify that class name. So blue paragraph, we see that it will be applied to the next paragraph. If we want to apply this here, we just come here and then specify this as a blue paragraph. And that happens. So that is basically how we can assign classes to elements and then style the elements based on their classes. Using classes to style elements make your code reusable. So let's imagine we have a button here. Let's try and style a button here. So button with the text, let's say, try now. Good. And then there's also another button with the text, let's say, next, with this sign. Let's see if it's going to work. Good. And then there's a previous button as well. Let's see, there's a previous button as well with this sign. Good. So that is working now. And we want all our buttons to have a rounded corner. We want all our buttons to be green. Let's try that. So we use the element selector button. And then let's give it a background color of this. And then we haven't done padding, but let's add some padding, let's say 10 pixels. You would know what padding does. I think you have even seen what padding has done to our button. And then let's say we want a rounded button, and so border radius, we give it a border radius of 10 pixels. So this is going to help us style all our buttons like this. But in a situation where we rather want to assume that previous and next buttons are navigating buttons, and so they have to be styled differently, all that we do is to add this class. So class navi button. So we add this class to it as well. Navi button. No, I specify that as this. So now we come down here and then style it differently. So navi button, and let's assume navi buttons are supposed to be red. So background color red. So let's see what is happening here now. Navi BTN, good. And as soon as we change it, we can see that it has been changed into red. So this makes our code reusable. So we just put it onto an element we want to have our styling. And the ones we don't want to have that specific styling, we leave them out. So let's make this the text the color of white. So you can see that this is working fine. But have you thought of something yet? Why is it that we styled all of them with this aquamarine color, but as soon as we added the class, it has overridden the aquamarine styling on the navy buttons? Why is this happening? This is due to what we call specificity in CSS. So specificity basically refers to which styling rule is more important or is more specific to an element. In fact, element styles or element selectors are not that specific compared to class selectors. Let me take this again. Class selectors are more specific compared to element selectors, and so CSS would go for the more specific selector compared to the less specific selector. So this button selects all the button, and that is so general. So this is applying to all buttons that you insert on the page. But the class selector is more specific because it is telling us to go for all elements that have the navy button class. So elements that do not have that class do not get styled. There is one other selector, which is the ID selector we spoke about. So let's go with a paragraph. Let's go for a paragraph and then specify an ID special paragraph. This is my special paragraph. Let's see. So it is working fine. Now note that this hasn't been given a class attribute, but rather an ID attribute. And then we come this way. If you want to use the ID attribute, if you want to select an HTML by the ID, you use the hash key. And then, so special paragraph, and then change the styling. Let's change this text align. Let's make it center align. So it is working. And one thing you should take note of is that the ID selector is more specific even compared to the class. So it goes in this order: the element selector, the class selector, to the ID selector. Why? This is because with the ID, we are specifying that this specific element should have this particular styling. So we don't go for any other selector as we would have in the others, but this one, it is exclusive to one element and that element alone, because you can't have two different elements with the same ID. And so ID selectors are more specific compared to the class and the element selectors. We also have what we call the group selector. Assuming here the H2, we also have H3. This is my H3 element. And then we also have H4. This is my H4 element. Good. So here, let us style all of them. Assuming We haven't styled the H2 yet. So let's begin styling our H2. So let's come down here. And then H2, let's give it a color of, have we done green today? I don't think we've done green. Let's do green yellow. Good. If it's not really visible, then let's see if green would be good. So green is better. And then let us style this as well. H3 green, and then H4 green as well. What if we had 1,000 different elements and we want to style it this way? CSS has a shortcut to help us style all these elements in the same way. All that we do is, after writing the H2, we bring a comma, write our H3, comma, H4, and it's going to work in that same way. So now we can take these declarations off and nothing will happen to our code. Let us change this color and see if it's indeed working. So let's make it red here. And you can see that all the elements H2, H3, H4 have been given the color of red. Mind you that if you do not bring this comma, then you are specifying something different. So let's assume that we have H2 and then span. Or let's even go for H3 and see what is going to happen. You see, nothing is happening here, but let us nest this H3 within the H2 and see if something is going to happen. So we have cut the H3, we are going to paste that in the H2. So you see, this is not really being what we expected. So let us do this rather. Let us create a paragraph, and then within the paragraph we also create a span. So paragraph, and then this is my paragraph containing a span element. So within the paragraph, let us create a span element, and then let us insert this element inside the span element. Good. So we can style this span element this way. So we get our paragraph, and then let's make this color aqua. And I think this color is not that visible. Let's make it green. I think green has become our favorite now. Yeah. And I think you understand why all the paragraphs have now become green. This is because it was set as red here, and then when it got here, it changed into green because of the way our CSS file is read. It is read from top to bottom. So here we can set the span. So as soon as we write our span here, you can see that it is a span element that has changed into green. So just as I was saying, if you do not bring the comma, what our CSS would interpret your code as is that there is a paragraph on the page, and within that paragraph there is a span element. Color that item within the span element green, and this is what the CSS is targeting. So we have the paragraph element, and within the paragraph element there's a span element. So let's change this into my span element. So you see that my span element is green now. We can change the color here to, or maybe even change the declaration. So let's go for text decoration underline. So you can see our element has been underlined. Let's go for something. Okay, let's continue with the color blue so that you can see it well. And then even transform. So text transform. Let's transform that into an all uppercase. And you can see that is working. So if you don't bring your comma to separate different elements, this is what you get. There is one other element that we can style, or one other selector called the universal selector. We usually use the universal selector to override all the browser default settings or to reset our HTML or CSS instructions. And this is how we write our universal selector. We use the star key, and then let's give it a text, a font family. Let's give it a font family of, let's say, impact, and see if it's going to work. So you can see that as soon as we assign our universal selector a font family of impact, all the elements have been assigned the same font family. So what this universal selector does is that it selects all the elements you have in your HTML document and gives it the styling you want to give inside this curly braces. Now, one big thing I want us to consider is the concept of specificity, and I think we have touched on it in several ways. So specificity is a general rule that is used by CSS to tell which HTML instruction or which CSS instruction or which property to assign to a specific element, especially in situations where you have described two or more instructions. So when you hover over the HTML element, so the selector, you can see the specificity here. So this one has a specificity of 000. That one has a specificity of 001. So in other words, it has a specificity of 1, which is an element selector. This is also an element selector, and it has a specificity of 1. That has a specificity of 10 because it is a class selector. Let us look at an ID selector. An ID selector has a specificity of 100, which means that when it meets a class selector, it would have precedence over that class. And that is why in some parts of the code, we realize that the class overrides whatever element we select. So here, you know that paragraphs are supposed to have a color of red here. Let us take this. Okay, so this is not being overridden because it is targeting a different element, which is a span. So we know that all our paragraphs are supposed to be red. This is a paragraph, but it is blue. This is because it has been assigned a class of blue paragraph, and the blue paragraph has a color of light sky blue. And since the class selector has a higher specificity compared to the paragraph selector, which is just 1, it means that our class selector is going to take precedence. Now, If you don't want to use this Mozilla giving specificity, you can go online and search for CSS specificity calculator, and this is what I wanted. Yes, so they have a bunch of predefined specificities values for you. So let's give this a div. You can see that a div has a specificity of 1. Let's give this a class of div, and you can see that it has a specificity of 10. We can even add more classes. So another class of, let's say, my class, and you can see it has a specificity of 20. Another class, my third class, and you can see it has a specificity of 30. Let's make this an ID, and you can see that it has a specificity of 100. So just as MDN gives, you can also use a specificity calculator online, and you can use that to compare why your code is behaving in a way that you may not understand. There are also some instances where you can write a lot of lines of code and you wouldn't understand why your code is behaving in a certain way. Sometimes you have set a paragraph color of red like this, and then when it comes down, another rule has overridden, but you don't really know which rule has overridden your elements. All that you do is that you can come here, so you can open this browser. Let's make it bigger, and then right click on any element you want to inspect, open the inspect, open the elements, and then you can see whatever you would want to inspect. So these are the computed stuff. Now let us open this paragraph rather, and then we see what we want to see. So in this paragraph, no, it's even this very paragraph I want us to inspect, because that one was supposed to have good. So this is what I wanted us to see. So you can see that initially this color was set to red by this style sheet, the style sheet above here. It sets our color to red, but the red has been overridden. That is why it has been cancelled now. And then this is the color that is being used because of specificity issues. So the color that you are seeing now is the light sky green. So you may know that I have set all my paragraphs to red. Why is this being a paragraph but being displayed with a color of blue? You can do a simple inspect to know why your elements are behaving the way they are behaving. So all that you do is to right click and then inspect, and then open the styles tab, and then you are going to see what you want to see. And then we'll get to this box later in our course. We'll come back and then inspect this box as well.